I was 17 years into the restaurant business. We were doing huge sales and it was everything I ever wished for, and I was miserable. The number one thing that you want to do is when you're having to explain the concept, and if you're in an elevator and the elevator pitch needed 12 floors, that's not a good restaurant concept. And there's so many ways to differentiate, even if you're providing the exact same food. Anyone that actually is good at running multi-unit restaurants is, so I'm gonna call it a little, I think for a lot of people, like growing isn't always better. So to do it all over again, I would.
I'm excited for today's episode because we're chatting with one of the people that I admire most in the restaurant industry, the legendary co-founder of Mendocino Farms, who over the past 20 years has been able to achieve what so few restaurant brands have been able to do. He's gone from one location in downtown LA to now more than 50 locations and growing quickly. We're going to be going through his journey in actually creating the Mendocino Farms brand, as well as the biggest lessons that he's learned along the way in building such an iconic business. Mario, welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you. Really appreciate it. Heck of an introduction. I hope my first grade teacher could actually have heard that. She had very low hopes for me. So thank you.
Would actually love to start there.
Okay.
From the beginning.
Since first grade?
Since the beginning of the restaurant industry, which I know for you was early years, teenager, when you started in the restaurant world. So tell me more about how it was that you found your way into the world of restaurants.
Yeah, look, I think everyone's path is, slightly different, but there's so many similarities. But the one thing that I had going for me is my family had been in the meat industry for almost 100 years. So my great-grandfather was a butcher. My grandfather ended up creating one of the first meat processing plants, and my dad ended up, going in the business. So not only were we around kind of the industry of supplying restaurants, but they were also like phenomenal cooks. So I grew up like already like around food innovation and how important. And then again, my last name's Del Pero. I'm Italian American. We use food to heal everything and for every celebration. So I was really kind of a food person. So going off to college, I actually used to help supplement, the beer fund by actually cooking for everyone on my dorm floor. We had kitchens with multiple apartments, and that was one of my first gigs was basically floor chef for a good group. Not a bad gig, by the way. Huge markups. And then I was unbelievably fortunate. My path was not to be in the hospitality industry at all, as much as I always appreciated it. But one of my closest friends, his dad, and he was graduating, were going to create a new concept. And I think I was more curious from an entrepreneurial standpoint of how do you build something from scratch. And I got to be what I actively call as their Sherpa, which basically meant I carried stuff for them, but they let me be a fly on the wall as the two of them. And the two gentlemen, Ron and Greg Newman, created this incredible concept called Baja Shark East. And there's multiple of them all along the Southern California coast. And they've gotten into fine dining restaurants. And it's an incredible restaurant chain. But I was one of their first team members, started in 1993 while I was still in college, but really got to see them do something that was very innovative, very progressive. They truly understood, and as we'll kind of talk, who their avatar was. They did not design that restaurant to necessarily have this wide berth and be everything to everybody. They really focused in. It was a 21-year-old male, period, right? And they made sure that the food, the environment, the ambiance, the specials, every aspect of it was programmed to becoming the greatest place that 21-year-old male didn't even know they wanted. And they created that. And it was, they did incredible sales, still do incredible sales. But it was, I think we had taken over an old fish shack that had never broken 2 million in sales. And easily in year one, we broke 6.5 million in sales. It was
out of a single location, 6.5
single location. It was widely the most successful thing you'd ever seen in your life, but they nailed on everything that 21-year-old male needed. They understood their avatar. So anyway, got to learn from two geniuses that have continued to innovate and do incredible things. So I kind of caught the bug. Admittedly, like, you can make money by making people happy. Like that's very engaging, especially, from, kind of my Italian American upbringing of taking care of people, right, with food and creating real hospitality, real care. And then they come back and bring their friends and spend more money. So, I was sucked in, and, I pivoted, what I was going to go be a lawyer, and I probably would have been awful. Even though now I still look at a lot of lease agreements and still think I'm lawyer-y. That's the extent of my legal work, these days. But I pivoted and decided that I wanted to be all in the hospitality business. So yeah, that was me graduating USC.
And it sounds like one of your big takeaways from Baja Sharkies was that they knew their customer avatar from the beginning, that 21-year-old male, and built the whole experience around them. Can you describe what that looked like from a leadership perspective and what you observed in being one of the founding team members of that restaurant that then you were able to take on in your journey?
Yeah, great question. I would say there's three nuggets to take away from, Ron and Greg Newman early days in creating, Baja Sharkies. The first one in understanding the avatar, but like to actually build an entire marketing scheme around this person. So this is predating. We're talking 1993. So there is not Instagram, right? There isn't even, what year has Mark, gone to Harvard? The Facebook is not around. Okay. None of these things exist. In fact, if you wanted to Google, you were still, it wasn't running very quickly. Okay. So the internet, like, we were still faxing sales at the end of the night. Okay. This is the world of 1993. But from a marketing standpoint, they used every single thing at their disposal, from everything from flyers to 21-year-old males have, all of them are living in these apartments. They're working, post-college, their white-collar job, and they all have refrigerators. The one thing that they have common of all their refrigerators is it usually has a few condiments, a few cans of beer, and usually no food, right? So we created these giant magnets that we gave every single person, enough that it would fit in your pocket, but big enough that it was easily the biggest magnet you put on your fridge. And we had the specials, the dinner specials, every single day, if you came in, to entice them when they went to their fridge, that they were like, oh my God, it's actually the steak dinner night at Sharky's. I should just go, right? So they really understood how to connect. We used to throw all kinds of events. So Jack Daniels, which we sold a lot of Jack Daniels. We found that the 21-year-old male loved coming to Jack Daniels' birthday. Guess what? Jack Daniels had a birthday about 3 times a year. We didn't wait once a year, because guess what? No one was actually counting what Jack Daniels' birthday was. So, it was that level of programming around the avatar that we dug in. And then as far as we had tons of promotional nights for 21 to 24-year-old females. So when Melrose Place had just come out, Melrose Place was on Mondays. Guess what's on Mondays that 21-year-old males love? Monday Night Football. So what did we do? Back in the days when we had literally VHS tapes and we were taping crazy things, we would tape Melrose Place in New York, right? Because we had satellites. So we would tape Melrose Place, and then actually the minute Monday Night Football ended, Melrose Place came on at that abridged time. We would get all of these young ladies to come in to watch Melrose Place because they knew it was a full bar of 21-year-old guys. Guess what the 21-year-old guys did? They stayed around, because all of a sudden, like 50 or 80 young ladies walked in at 9:15 or 9 o'clock to watch Melrose Place. And it would end up, we would have an incredible Monday night that would usually end at 2 o'clock. And most people came to their jobs late, thanks to us. But they had a great time. So, it was that level of programming around it. We were very sensitive on looking at what our price elasticity is and how we priced items. We really paid attention to that. And then we tried to create an enormous amount of value with both the food and the beverages. So you felt like you were getting a real bang for your buck, right? There was nowhere else that you could get it. Like we were, I like to think that we were giving Costco sizes. Like we were the first I've ever seen to do pitchers of Jack and Coke. We used to do, giant, cocktails. Still to this day, I just went recently, and they had an espresso martini that had to be over a gallon, but it was in a martini glass, but it was the biggest martini glass you'd ever seen in your life. It was an espresso martini for 5 people. It was unbelievable. But again, this huge value centric, right, for the person. So these are massive differentiators. And if I was going to take the big takeaway that you'll hear me say over and over again is there's so often like we want to do a business because we're, like, oh, that would, hopefully people aren't like this, but most are. That would make money. Mm-hmm. Stop. Like, look at a problem that needs to be solved. Hopefully it's a problem that you wish was solved for yourself. But look at a problem that needs to be solved. And if you can solve it more eloquently, you're bringing value into the world, right? And they really did. Now, whether you think the 21-year-old male needed that value, that's up to you. But it was great lessons I was able to take away.
It's such a valuable first lesson to learn as you're entering the restaurant industry, because a trap that I see a lot of restaurant owners get dragged into is trying to be everything to everybody, where they try and create a concept that has such a wide appeal that they end up not appealing to any specific group very strongly. And what you're describing is the owners of that concept knew exactly who their customer was and their surrounding lifestyle and psychology, the TV shows they watched, the needs that they had that were unmet, like how they constantly had an empty fridge. So if they could put a reminder in front of their fridge, it would lead to that incremental business. And I really want to dig into this as we're talking about how you developed the Mendocino brand, but would love to understand, to get there, how it was that you went from being in college, one of the founding team members of Baja Sharkies, to then eventually starting your own concepts.
Look, I worked my way up and did every job. So I love founding team member. Yes. I was a bar back and I was a door host. So these were not the highest jobs on the totem pole, but key. And, worked my way up to, bartender, and really understood the business, really watched Ron Newman, the dad, particularly has an incredible ability to create menus. And so I got to be, again, if I was to tell anyone, like, as much mentorship as you can get from people that have done it before, you want to seek it out. And you'll hear me keep saying that over and over again. But the idea that I got to spend so much time with Ron in those early years and watching him really have menu architecture. And what I mean by this is, Ron would talk about things like entry points and hero items. He really looked at price. Like, I didn't know words like price elasticity at the time, but he would look at where competitor pricing was, and he made sure that from a quick look, that if you were looking at two things that you could compare, like a burger, you know what I mean, that he was going to be $1 less. Mm. He might make it up on some other items that weren't similar, but on things that he thought you could benchmark, he was going to make sure that he was going to be the more value concept, right? And just hearing him and how he thought through that, how he worked with his culinary team, and then again, this, and we'll talk about it more, but this notion of restless perfectionism, and this is, by the way, this is not my word. This is Heston Blumenthal, one of the most famous chefs in the world. But he has this phrase, restless perfectionism, and this notion of, like, even taking a great item and continuing to refine it, you know what I mean, and make it better, make it more craveable. Not just like it's good, right? But where it's great, where I would walk past someone that has that same item to come to this one because it's that special. Whether it's just with just flavor or presentation, like he really, Ron was a savant, and I got to learn how to do that from him, and have continued to refine that, and had, more mentors along the road. So learn that. I ended up wanting to leave them. Honestly, they created it. They were wonderful. They, treated me like, family. But I wanted to do my own thing, right? It's, that kind of that little bit of the you like to call it entrepreneurial bravado. It might be entrepreneurial naivete, but you're like, I want to go do my own thing. And it's not like I can do it better than them. In fact, I didn't want to even be in the, with liquor. There's all kinds of things that were difficult in scaling a concept that is very much alcohol forward, liability, one of them. And I was really starting to be healthier and focused on that, and really felt like there was a restaurant that could be better for you. I like to think I was a little bit before my time, because it didn't do great. It did okay. And that was this concept that I did called skews. And it was all these different skewers. It really was very pro Atkins, the Atkins diet. I'm now fully dating myself. Did you know there was a thing called the Atkins diet? Have you ever heard of it?
I did.
Please tell me you've heard of it.
My mom told me about it.
Your mom told you about it. Jesus. Oh, God. Okay. Well, there's a big thing. It was called the Atkins diet. So this was, even though you think with skewers, I had rice and I had brown rice, and I was one of the early players to have that. But it was really protein forward with all these different skewers. And I ended up putting it next to, these high end, the first one was next to the Spectrum, which was, the early days version of an Equinox, so I did that in Manhattan Beach, and started to grow that. The only good thing that came out of that, besides a ton of lessons of probably what not to do, was on my third unit, I was really struggling. Cost had overrun. I mean, the typical story that's been told by every restaurant person over and over again. One, operating 3 with no operational oversight besides the founder starts to get a little crazy, right? Can't be in 3 places. You can be at 2 places in the same day. You really can't be in 3.
Yeah.
So that was a whole deal. Construction had massively overrun, gone over budget, and I was able to bring in an investor, and this investor, at the time I was dating the investor, and it ended up being both my co-founder in Mendocino Farms and then my wife. So I ended up marrying my first investor. But what Ellen really brought, which was a massive lesson, and I can go way deeper into it, later on, but it truly does take a team. Ellen, I always say that I was operating restaurants prior to meeting Ellen. I actually got in the restaurant business when Ellen joined. She's a tried and true operator, tried and true administrator, tried and true CEO. She just knows how to run a company and has a ton of business acumen, that was a perfect mix to more my ops knowledge, my creativity, and it just was an unbelievable partnership that I'm ridiculously grateful for. Now, granted, I got to actually have an amazing family, and I still have an amazing wife, and we got to build a great company with awesome people. But truly, she did compliment me and unlocked that business. She cleaned it up. She was able to sell it, and with those proceeds, she and I created Mendocino Farms.
That is awesome. What a great story. I would love to learn more about the biggest lessons you learned from that process of starting your first concept, because I think that restaurant owners today will look at you and think of you as almost an overnight success in all that you've achieved, and seeing so many incredible accolades to your name.
30-year overnight success.
Exactly. But they now see you as one of the most prestigious people in the restaurant industry, but they don't see in that original concept some of the challenges you faced or the things that felt like they were going to potentially put you out of business. So if you could talk about some of those big mistakes in that first concept that you made that you then didn't repeat in Mendocino Farms, I think that would give a lot of actionable value to people that are earlier in their journey as restaurant owners.
Really good question. Yeah, I'll give you 2. The biggest one, and this is not to dissuade anyone that has a very niche restaurant concept, but I basically was doing skewered meat better for you with a little bit of a slant towards this bento concept. But it was a bento concept that came out of Portland, Oregon in the early 1990s. So it was kind of like you would have yakitori chicken over the white rice, and it was thought of as kind of like healthier, and it definitely in relative terms to fast food, far healthier. So I was kind of doing Japanese, but not really, and it wasn't sushi. It was super niche-y yakitori. So I was a niche of a niche of a niche concept, right? And it's very hard. I will just say it to any founder out there. Look what category that you're picking. You know what I mean? And I think mine was just a little bit too before its time. I was putting calories and fat, and like I was breaking down every food item for my guest on every item. Guess what? Most of my guests didn't want to see that. Like I was doing things that later got mandated ish, right? Like I was just way too like it was way too niche. The second thing I would say, and this one's where, I was kind of alluding to it, is that I think it's really important for the structure of the team that you put together. I was one-sided. I had two partners, both of which quit within the first few months because they were basically, they realized they bought themselves a ticket on the Titanic. Okay. And there was like 2 lifeboats and both of them got off. And by the way, they've been both wildly successful. So one killed it in real estate. The other one's probably the most beloved
restaurant
lawyer in the country, Riley Lageson. So Riley actually, I remember got in an argument with me, and it was storming off. And I go, "Where are you going? Like, where are you going?" And he goes, "I'm going to law school." And I actually didn't see him again for another 2 years. So he definitely took that and still to this day, he's my lawyer, and he's like my best friend. And we were college roommates together. And pretty cool. He actually created this category really of restaurant law from being truly an operator. So if anyone ever doubts if Riley ever operated, he was not really good at it, but yes, he fully operated restaurants and worked in the restaurants with me. So the second lesson I would say that I took from SKUs is actually like building the right team that complements each other. I was way too early. I had not learned enough systems. With even with Baja Sharkies, they were still in their early years of figuring out like real systems. So I only had those to take with me, and then whatever I could figure out. We did not have enough systems, in place. I did not have sophistication around payroll. A lot of these technology tools didn't exist. So you want to wonder what marketing we did. There was the hustle, but like we would, I was going to Spectrum and getting trainers, and I gave them like ambassador level status, so they got like discounted food because they're a trainer, as long as they recommended and handed menus right to their high end, trainees. That was the limit of what I could afford in marketing, right? With some free meals for trainers. We didn't have any of these tools. I didn't have enough experience. So to do it all over again, I would have spent more time working from a company that actually had some more systems. Had I left Sharkies, because I got a ton of the creativity, they now have incredible systems, and then worked for someone maybe a little bit bigger, I think I would have been in way healthier shape to go scale, the business. So those were 2 watch outs. Yeah. Go learn from the people that are doing it best. Make sure that you have, if you're going to be a founder, make sure you're with super creatives, that you've learned from those founders, as well as that you learn from like some of the bigger companies and some of their systems.
You mentioned that one of the turning points for you was being able to partner with Ellen, where she was an investor of yours, then you realized was amazing operationally and could help you take the concept to the next level because she complemented your skill set. And I know a lot of restaurant owners feel that they need that Ellen partner to them, that feel creative and visionary, but want somebody to help them operationalize it and run the business, but they don't know where to start in actually finding or attracting that person. What advice would you give to them?
In finding the right partners to complement you?
Yes, and particularly that operational partner that can complement the creative visionary.
Yeah, Look, I think there's a lot of ways that you can slice the apple. Okay. I guess my first inclination would be to tell you that, like, if you've never really been like an operator of a multi-unit and your intent is to be a multi-unit, that if you can find someone that is best in class, that you're better off if you can get them to leave their great job. So by the way, it's a watch out if they're looking for a job, because anyone that actually is good at running multi-unit restaurants is never looking for a job. I just want to go on record. Someone that is great at running multi-unit restaurants is never looking for a job. Okay. This is from someone that's been in the business for 30 years. Okay. So you are getting them to leave a good job to come work for you with your vision, right? And to make sure that the trains run on time and do that. You're going to be probably giving up some real equity. And you need to know that, because you're not going to be able to afford their salary. So know that maybe someone has that entrepreneurial bug and they want to itch it. And that's, now you have all these great ways to go and find them, whether it be in LinkedIn or whatever other, systems of using that. But there's so many good ways to find that. Going to conferences is one of the great ways. There's so many people that we would afford, we would use our last dime to go to a restaurant conference to be able to network. And we did it so often to seek out mentorship. And some of those mentors ended up being key people in our lives and actually really helped pivot our businesses. So look, that'd be one. Now, granted, you might find a friend that seems to be better than you at it. Just know that you're going to go a lot slower because they're figuring it out. They haven't watched the movie play. That person that you just hired, that's an incredible badass operator, you're not just getting them, especially if you're bringing them in as a partner. You know what you're also getting? Anyone that's ever loved working for them, because they're probably going to migrate over. So just so you know, there is an actual huge additional, effect when you pull the right senior people. I would tell you one of the greatest kind of moments for Mendocino Farms, and we can get into that and that founding, was we finally got to a certain point where we had taken private equity money from a great private equity group, L. Catterton, and with their kind of sign off that we have potential, we were able to recruit this incredible vice president of operations from BJ's, a gentleman by the name of Steve Mincer. And Steve was very secure with a great company. And prior to that had been with Cheesecake Factory and had been stolen away to go to BJ's. So this is a very coveted rock star person. And I got to tell you, the day that Steve started, Ellen and I both looked at each other and were like, let's get ready. Cause he, there's a lot of watch outs as founders before you bring someone with that level of gravitas that you should have in place. But he really helped transform the business and professionalize it to a whole nother level.
I'm so curious to learn more about your team building philosophy, but would love to get to it after understanding how it was that you went from that acquisition of your 3-unit restaurant group to then starting Mendocino Farms with the proceeds. How it was that you actually decide that concept using that lesson that you learned about being mindful about the category you're entering, and the overall story that went from you exiting and then wanting to re-enter the restaurant industry with a new concept that ended up becoming so successful.
Well, don't think for a second that when Ellen and I sold SKUs that we were like, should we really be doing the restaurant business? So that came up after we got past that initial maybe we suck at this. And we're smart people. We probably could do something else. After we got past that, that lesson was really relevant. We truly believe that we were just niche on niche on niche. When you're having to explain the concept, and if you're in an elevator and the elevator pitch needed 12 floors, that's not a good restaurant concept. Okay. So look, we basically said, what are the 3 largest categories that exist? And at the time, it really burgers was obvious. I have a meat background and I really we had already learned a lot about catering, oddly enough, from our prior concept. And so we're like, we can't cater burgers. They don't travel. They're not to go. We were already seeing that off-premise was starting to become a thing. This is years before third-party delivery, but like we saw that like delivery, was good and burgers don't travel well. Or at least as a meat guy, I'm like, it's not a great experience. Granted, the Shake Shacks of the world have plenty of off-premise sales, right? And then the second category, pizza. Look, I'm Italian American. This predates the existence of like the Blazes and the mod pizzas and that fast kind of Chipotle style making of a personal pizza kind of thing. And not that would have been something that would have gotten me excited either. So we were looking at pizzas and we're like, where's the room to innovate? Didn't really see it. And then sandwiches, which by the way is the largest category. So at this time, think about it, Subway was on an absolute hockey stick of growth, and right behind it was Quiznos. Quiznos was wildly successful. This is 20 years ago. So we really saw that there was an obvious need for something from like what we were experiencing with a Jones on Third or a Clementine, these high-end sandwich places in LA. They have them, like I can name almost every high-end sandwich place in every major city now, right? But in Portland, you have the Lardos, you have these great sandwich places, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have at that time, a lot of regional players that were slightly better than Quiznos and Subway. Now they're national players like Jimmy John's. That was a regional player. Jersey Mike's, they were regional players. So we saw that like something more elevated that really like had a price point, maybe $1 or $2 more than these regional kind of premium players. But with the same quality as a Jones on Third. And that was really like, and I only say Jones on Third because I love Joan and love the concept. But we had a really high-end sandwich place in my hometown. I'm from north of Sacramento called David Berkeley's. So like gourmet sandwiches existed, but most of the time they were $12 to $14. This is 20 years ago, which, that's an expensive sandwich then. And our business plan was like, let's make it up in volume. We'll eat it literally in food cost. Even if we run high food costs, we're going to sell like a 10 or 11 luxury sandwich and we're going to do it fast. We're operationally going to line up that we can do massive volume. And that was really the kind of that got us excited that we had the cheat code to, operationally how to set up the kitchen. We understood those ingredients. It was a problem that we wanted solved for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. That was the kind of the core thinking around Mendocino Farms.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it really started from a place of business analysis and strategy where you were looking for the fastest growing category. You saw sandwich taking off with Subway and Quiznos, but at the same time, you saw that these smaller independent players like Jones were crushing it at a very high price point, and you wanted to merge the two trends, the very premium product with a fast casual atmosphere to create this brand that you thought would be explosive.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So like, again, people are like, oh, good idea. I'm like, the idea already existed. We just kind of like put those things together. There was other good data points. Ron Shake at Panera was already having massive success in Suburbia, doing kind of an elevated experience. He had started building nicer dining rooms, you know what I mean, around his sandwiches. So we saw that there were some good indications around it. Yeah.
This is one of the most interesting themes I've noticed in the most successful people in business that entrepreneurs, when they're starting out, myself included, don't initially see, because we're told as we're growing up in society and then starting our own businesses that there's huge value in being completely unique, that differentiation is everything. And I think that's what leads people down that path where you're trying to find a niche of a niche of a niche. It's this very interesting type of Japanese cuisine that's also healthy. And there's this story that we tell ourselves that if we find that niche of a niche of a niche that is super unique, that will be our biggest differentiating factor that will lead to success. But in reality, if you study the story of how Walmart became so successful, or Domino's Pizza, or Kava, it's all taking existing concepts that are working really well. Starbucks, same deal.
Yeah.
They took the concept from Italy and then they found a way to make it even better for a specific group of people. And then that is what led to their breakout success.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, yes. And you named great ones, but like, did we think we needed another burger place when Danny Meyer, really started scaling, or really, Randy Grudy started scaling Shake Shack? Did we think we needed it? but it was very differentiated. It was differentiated in its delivery, in the execution, and it's enriched all the neighborhoods that it keeps going in, right? So that's, like you do not have to create this unbelievable Frankenstein unique, thing. It's an improvement of where other people are already having success.
Yes. And the big lesson from Shake Shack is that the existing burger concepts that were so successful, McDonald's and Burger King, were appealing to a type of customer that was very different from the customer that Danny Meyer wanted to serve, because his first location was outside of Madison, actually in Madison Square Park, right in the very high-end office area with the advertising offices and tech offices. And so he realized that this higher end, upper middle class or wealthy customer was being alienated by the existing burger options that were very low price points, and that there was room to give them a premium product that would align with their identity. And because he had that clarity of who he wanted to serve, he knew exactly what the perfect menu to create for them would be.
So well said. Yeah, so well said.
And so what was that clarity in your mind with Mendocino Farms? It sounds like you wanted to create that premium sandwich concept, but who did you think of as your customer in those early days?
Yeah, look, we went at the bottom of a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles, that Class A skyscraper. So it was law firms, it was accounting firms, it was a high-end clientele. It was only open Monday through Friday. It was only open at lunchtime. And to be frank, we actually thought, and this is where I try to, get founders to caution when they think that they've solved all the problems. I've cracked the code. You know what I mean? I've solved it. I was so confident after opening our second one in downtown, a block away, that killed it even more, right? So I had two that had, that Ellen and I had that had 70 people lines, and it was, bustling, and everyone's
one block away from your original location, you opened a second one, and they each had lines.
Giant lines. Giant. Looked like Russian, bread lines back, during perestroika. I mean, these were long lines, and we were rocking, and and you can start to almost feed into that so much. And I remember just so confidently, I had asked one of my good friends, Chris Sims, who's founder of Lazy Dog, and his dad's a legend. His dad actually is a legend. I know I got the introduction. I'm like, the legends are some of my mentors. I can give you the list of legends. I'm not on it, but thank you.
I consider you to be one too.
I'll take it right now. I'll take it. Okay. But one of the legends is this gentleman named Tom Sims. And I remember so confidently, and Tom Sims, he created Mimi's Cafe, but he has been the thought leader behind so many restaurant brands, right? He's the person that the founders know, right? And so Tom, I invited Tom. I'd asked Chris, will your dad come? I want feedback. What I really wanted Tom to do is validate what a genius I was, and then how much he might maybe want to invest or whatever. And I remember Tom, in just such a matter of fact, he's just, first of all, he's so intellectual, and he's just and he looked at me and he goes, yeah, you got to go to Suburbia. I go, Suburbia? I go, Tom, I've cracked the code in this urban setting. I got these landlords. They're paying for most of the build out. I'm doing incredible sales. It's a great lifestyle for managers. I had every defense for Tom, except for Tom was yeah, okay. Did you want my input or not? You need to go to Suburbia. In fact, I think you actually need to go take on Ron Shake at Panera. And I think you need to go where it's an elevated area that's more elevated than what a Panera should be. And he goes, I go, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, that's the big 7 days a week, lunch and dinner. That's the unlock, for you to know whether, and by the way, you're going to struggle. He actually even told me, he goes, you're going to have the worst first year. He goes, and it's going to uncover so many things that are flawed with your current system. And if you can get through it and accomplishment, I think you might have something pretty special. And by the way, I wanted to argue with him so bad, except for literally he had to leave. This is one of the greats, and here I wanted to be defensive. And the best thing I did was not say anything, even though in my head I wanted to really debate with him, right, on it. And it soaked in. In fact, guess where we did our third unit? Right. In Suburbia, in Maria del Rey, right across the street from a Panera Bread. And guess what? That year was a nightmare. And I learned every lesson. And it transformed our business. And we ended up, now we have 66 Mendos, I think, as of today. And I would say almost 55 of them are in affluent suburbia. It defines what our concept is. It changed our average unit volumes. It transformed our company, and it was because we were able to shut up and listen and really process when a mentor was giving us some really insightful stuff, even though it wasn't what we wanted to hear. So look, if I was to ever share with any, if you seek out a mentor, you're not just like changing with the wind if they give you advice, but I would bite your tongue for a second and take it in, because they've already made it. You've asked for it. Get the value from it, right? But it changed our business. And I still to this day thank Tom every time I see him. And I see him actually at least once a year and thank him profusely. Yeah.
That is fascinating, because I would take a similar approach to, it sounds like what you instinctually wanted to say, which was your original 2 locations were right around all the office towers, crushing it in a very urban market. And this idea that you would take that proven formula and bring it to suburbia where there are no offices or white shoe law firms for the lunch business, and instead try to sell to those high-end families seems so counterintuitive to me. So what was the insight that led to that advice proving to be so true? And why did it take more than a year for those locations to ramp if those were the right answer all along?
Look, so I'll break that up because it's a few questions. So the first one that you asked last is, why did it take a year to ramp in suburbia? Is that what you asked?
Yes.
It didn't take a year for it to ramp. We got absolutely annihilated. Why it was so awful to go do it is it was so complicated, because before you could almost kind of gear up for the big game and all we had to do was get through a lunch rush. Now we had to reset this kitchen and then get annihilated at dinner, right? That was a whole nother level of process. In fact, we didn't even build the first walk-in the right size. Like none of the equipment or the layout was really established for 2 day parts and having a transition area where you could continue to prep. Like there was so much with the restaurant design. Our first design was pay last, because we were basing it off of, gosh, I can't even remember when, but both us and Tender Greens, I remember, were pay last. It was a disaster because it's one thing if you're in an urban setting with like lawyers and accountants that are, that are like, and they're only ordering one item for themselves, they can of course remember the one item. But when mom or dad has the entire family on a Saturday and they have 4 kids and they just place 6 orders, and now we're asking them to memorize like what they ordered at the end. So our ordering format, so we had to actually switch around the restaurant after 6 months of being open. So many adjustments, to the building had to be made, and lessons learned that it really was transformative of like what their needs were and how big the dining room needed to be at the time, and how to even handle like delivery, right? Delivery for us was pickups of orders of 1 sandwich, right? Someone would like either call, I think we might have had email back then, but don't know. They would call and be able to come down, and like all of a sudden we're in suburbia. You're doing orders for 20, and they're not catering. They were individual. It was a different beast. So that year was more lessons learned in the fire, not wondering whether like this was a good idea to come to suburbia, right? It wasn't that, right?
Interesting. Yeah. So the demand was there right away.
Right away.
You got pounded with the demand and realized that the operational model needed to be significantly more resilient to this flow of business that wasn't just one rush that you could prep for, and was in fact happening multiple times a day,
That's right.
7 days a week.
That's right.
So then the insight that your mentor had that led to that, what was it exactly? How did he know that your concept would catch fire in high-end suburbia?
Well, first of all, I don't think that Tom Sims was able to predict that we would be avoiding a global pandemic. So I don't think he had that level. But by the way, if he did, I wouldn't put it past him because he's a smart guy. But look, he understood how limited that you're going to run out of urban settings, right? Like that, like at the most we could put in downtown for these Mendocino Farms in downtown LA was probably 4, 5. Right. And he knew that that now you have to jump to a new market the bigger issues to, to really consider, especially if you're doing a certain level of quality, food, is supply chain. I mean, not to take it to a military level, but, everyone that owns a multi-unit in the restaurant space understands that you can live and die by your supply chain. And he knew that by jumping to different urban settings was not going to be a way to scale this. He also knew that you could make so much more money in a building that was open for another day part and then for the big weekends. And what it allowed is I think we had average unit volumes of probably 2.2 million, which are insane for one day part, 5 days a week. But we immediately jumped to like 3.5. I think 3.7 was the first year of Marie Del Rey. It got to 4.3. It then broke 5 million. And when you're doing, north of 4 million out of that same size box, there's a lot of additional money to pay for oversight, management, training, coaching. We talk about like everyone wants to scale culture, and I don't want to jump around like on the lessons, but that comes with a price. Training comes with a price. And there's an upfront price. And if your building can actually create a certain amount of revenue, then a lot of things can, if you're willing to allocate it, can actually cover it. And so having buildings now that we're doing north of 4 million allowed for us to grow at a really, really healthy way, right? With a lot of oversight, a lot of training.
So it's fascinating. It sounds like there was all these details operationally that got upgraded through you moving to Suburbia. And to bring back the first theme that we were talking about in knowing your customer, I think one of the things that was on his mind as he shared that advice with you is processing that your customer, these lawyers and accountants in these office towers, probably lived in Suburbia and would consume the product so much more with their families because it was the product that was appealing to them, not necessarily the location and convenience factor of having it in the office tower.
Yes, absolutely. That was a captive audience for that office worker, right? But now we go home with them.
Yep.
Right. And so that was a game changer. And for that matter, their spouse, whether it be the husband or the wife, or alternatively, to be able to be a neighborhood gathering place for them. I think that was one of the things, my business partner, my wife, really, really dug in on when we built the first restaurant in our hometown. We live in Studio City, California, but we put the first one in the Valley in Sherman Oaks. And so it was a lot of our friends were going there. And we really saw, kind of a transformative shift. This was like one of our first 10, where it was almost all females just that day. Okay. And almost no one was consuming a sandwich. They were using this as their upscale cafe. And the finishes at that time were very urban and they were very masculine. And at that point, Ellen had kind of an aha moment. And we really put our money where our mouth is and hired 4 of the best architects that we could find in the country that would take us on, and gave them each their own Mendo to design, but making sure that we did it for our new avatar, which wasn't this business person. We had not shifted, right? The new avatar was this, was really this Lululemon mom. And like, what is her neighborhood gathering place? What does it look like? What does it have in it? What are the color palette? And really shifted. We actually had 4 different architects interpret that. And which was cool too, because each one of those spots had its own soul, had its own vibe, which was really fun as well. So yeah, that was a huge transformative shift using that same lesson.
I really want to emphasize that transformative shift because it sounds like you accelerated when you narrowed your target customer even further from the Class A office tower accountant and lawyer, which could span demographics. There's people that are starting at the law firm versus the secretaries versus the managing partners. Yeah. And then you got it even more specific when you began to expand to having meta units. And you said, we're going to serve the Lululemon mom. What would she want in a space? What would make her feel welcome?
That's right.
And that's what ended up catching so much fire among that exact demographic.
That's right. So from marketing to aesthetics, to price point, to focus on innovation. It was all around taking care of her. We didn't try to ignore, like we still like would have like a hearty or like an indulgent sandwich. Not to say the Lululemon mom doesn't want that, but we really upped our salad game. We really upped, the environments that we were creating, and really saw a huge adjustment with Ellen and her leadership around how they marketed and how it looked and how even we shot the menus. We started using, this very Martha Stewart kind of whited out look, because that was kind of hot. Now I'm again dating myself. This is like 12 years ago, right? This is pre-Martha in prison. Okay. So that gives you, the vibe shift that we had, changing.
Absolutely fascinating. I would love to dig in to how it was that you ended up expanding to then dozens of locations. It sounds like the first one or two or three were funded from your proceeds. It was super successful right away. But at some point you decided to raise money from private investors and private equity. How did you think about when you were ready to do that? And how did you actually approach that process?
Yeah, look, I always try to share with founders that in the restaurant space, unlike technology, which I know nothing, so I shouldn't even almost like compare, but there isn't this like race to entry. You know what I mean? It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, right? And if you're really, your intent in the restaurant space, because there's been very few people that have made a quick buck. Like if you tried to like list people that had like a quick founder exit, like you've seen in technology, in the restaurant space, it would be almost, you're describing an anomaly. It just doesn't happen. So the intent should be trying to build evergreen businesses, right? So you want to make sure that you have everything right and you've got it right. And it's not a rush. You don't need to worry about like someone's going to steal market share, right? There's so many ways to differentiate, even if you're providing the exact same food, right? Your delivery of it, the level of hospitality, your level of training, you know what I mean? The quality of the ingredients, the package. I mean, there's just so much other ways to create value and differentiate. The idea that you might like, by not getting that corner, you've lost out, you know what I mean? Or, that's just wildly untrue. It just has not happened. And, you even heard it a little bit in the pizza place. Where you had all of the, the pizza players, like it was a rush to who could be the biggest. And I think that's it's a bad plan. It's really never proven itself to be a good one. So to really like go in and answer about like, how we thought about growth and how we thought about bringing on, it took us almost 3 years at the first unit to really, really get it right to open that second store. And even at the second store, we realized that we didn't have the level of systems. I, in fact, remember going over to visit the second store, and it's packed. I mean, it's rocking. And we had a general manager that had come up through our ranks, and she was running the thing. And the food was the same. The menu was the same. Everyone was wearing our uniforms. And the vibe and the culture was fantastically different. Mind you, this is 1 block away from the other store. My wife goes, "How's it going?" I go, "I don't think it's a Mendo. I don't think this is a Mendocino Farms." She goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I go, we did not, like our values did not get scaled here. She's she's stressed out. It's showing on the staff. The staff is operating almost out of fear. The guests are feeling it. Just everyone's like no one's in a healthy place, and no one's being coached in the right way. And I go, it's on us. So we spent another year basically saying, first of all, what are our values, and how do we operationalize them? And my wife and I spent almost that entire year just focusing on the operationalization of our values and how they would live in our team members' everyday lives. We went so far as we created, and it's later, actually, the book just came out, Stop the Shift Show by Scott Greenberg. It just went live today. And it's a book, and it actually has the coaching style called 30-second leadership that we used, that we employed somewhat created. It really got refined by Scott Greenberg, who wrote a book about it. But we changed how we coached our team. We changed how managers talked. So we made sure that they spoke in Mendo speak, right? That they coached on brand. And it was transformative. And then at that point, even though the sales were there, we knew that we would have grown very unhealthily, right? We knew that we were not in a good place. And at that point, look, we were fortunate enough to, there was a great sister restaurant group, or a great group that we really admired in New York, called Chopped Salads, and wonderful founders, Tony and Colin, and then an incredible CEO. And the CEO of the brand, who was really like almost a founder to them, right? But is this guy, Nick Marsh. And he's literally still my older brother. He's gone from mentor to like close board member to now like older brother, right? That's the level of affection I have for Nick. But he's tried and true. He actually was he was the CEO of Cozy Zandu. Do you know this concept from New York?
I do not.
It was Cozy was one of the hottest sandwich concepts of the 1990s. It was on fire. In fact, when Zandu merged, it was a coffee company that tried to get acquired by Starbucks. It became Cozy Zandu, and it was, I mean, Panera later did it better, but it was the hottest, more upscale sandwich concept based off the sandwich concept out of France called Cozy. So needless to say, incredible concept. And Nick was the CEO. And he had gone all the way to taking it public to the company imploding. So I remember the first time meeting him, and I just had so many questions, and he had so much humility around what they did wrong and how he was applying those lessons to Chopped, that I remember going like, if you don't like put some money, like not only do I want you to put money in so you take our phone calls, right? But I have to have you on my board. And he became Ellen and my first board member. And from that relationship, we were able, a couple stores later, to have El Catterton, which is, I mean, at the time it was just called Catterton, but El Catterton, John Owsley, ended up coming on board. And I would tell you, one of the most important things, and like I always laugh, and did you ever watch the show Silicon Valley? It was out here a couple of years ago. Oh God, so well written. But there's one scene, and it's not even one of the main characters. Well, it's one main character, but he's talking to this young founder, and he's sitting there, and he's like on a park bench, and he's so upset that his company like totally like imploded, right? And the guy goes, "Well, what do you think the problem is?" He goes, "You know, they just offered us such a high valuation, and you have to take it, right?" And the guy goes, "No, you don't have to take a high valuation. You can go with a lower one with someone that you like better." He's like, "People do that? You're allowed to do that? Lower valuation?" He's like, "Yeah, it lowers expectations and you have the right partner." But it does this moment, and you see this guy's face who's like lost this almost like on the rise unicorn company. And he's like, "Oh my God, I didn't know you could do that." I would tell you, for those that want to scale and those that want to go through the private equity, that especially, I mean, this is always true, to take the less valuation for the right partner, because there's so many adjustments, there's so many pivots. The private equity group that has the most experience in the space, private equity group that you think that you're gonna get the most like mentorship from. I know El Catterton at the time was super close with this, again, legend, Bill Allen. And part of my deal was that Bill Allen become a board member. So all of a sudden now I have Nick Marsh, who's an incredible operator, currently CEO of Chopped Salads. Now he's CEO of a bigger company called Founders Table. And then Bill Allen, who had just got done being CEO of OSI, which was the holding company for Outback. And before that was the co-founder of Fleming Steakhouse. So he's been at 1 and he'd been at 1,000. And those were on the board of Mendo when we had 6, 7 units. What an incredible amount of advice and direction and stewardship that Ellen and I were getting. And it differentiated us. We really made a lot of choices that I might not have made, right? You get caught up in like cool stuff or focused, and they really made sure that we continued to kind of play out of the old playbook to a certain extent.
Right. So it sounds like after that second location opening, you didn't feel ready to take on the private money until your culture was dialed so that the ambiance and feeling that you had as a founder when you were in that second location matched the first location. Was that when you knew you were ready to start taking on private money to expand to the Marina Del Rey location and all of the others? Or what was the exact moment that you realized that you were ready to begin raising money because you had the multi-location operations down?
Yeah, let's get super real, because this is also a pivotal thing, because your podcast isn't called, Masters of Scale. That's already taken. I would tell you that Ellen and I had robust debate at 3 units because they were wildly successful, right? We were now making, as founders, more money than we ever thought that we could make. And I think for a lot of people, like, growing isn't always better. You are now going to be doing different jobs. If you thought that you were going to be touching guests all the time and touching your team all the time, you're not when you're at 20 units, 50 units, 66 units, right? It becomes a different job. So I would say first, scaling isn't always right. Like, you need to really weigh if it's a fit for you. And if you really want to, like, what are your desires that you're trying to do by scaling? For me, and this is like super revealing, is that I think at one altruistic level, I thought that this deserved to be in more neighborhoods, and I wanted to enrich them. At least that was the story that I told myself. That's definitely the story I told private equity. All right, it's a good story. This needs to be in more places. It's pretty good. Look how good we're doing. More places need this. That's a good story. I think for me, I was absolutely burnt out. I'd been doing this now, like, I'd already been doing it for 10 plus years before Ellen joined me. You know what I mean? I'd now been doing this for I was 17 years into the restaurant business, and we were doing huge sales, and it was everything I ever wished for. And it was finally like I had enough money to move out an apartment and enough money to not worry about like paying the bills. And I was miserable, and I was sad, and I was actually not having gratitude. And I needed more people to help me. And I felt like at that time that if we kept keeping it at 3, that it would be soon 1. That I couldn't keep the balls in the air. You know what I mean? And maybe Ellen was a little more confident in her talent, her ability to juggle. I was not confident in my ability to juggle anymore. We didn't have a maintenance person. You have 3 restaurants doing massive volume. You know what no one ever talks about? The amount of repairs that the restaurants have. We had so many repairs. I was hours on the phone with repair companies because we were breaking stuff because we were doing so good. Like all the problems you want to have, they sucked. It was awful. It was the least sexy, not creative grind I'd ever had. And I'm like, you know what? This can be bigger. We've shown that it's been successful. We need to start building a real team. We need to have real ops. And that was, so why did I do it? I actually tried to convince my partner to do it because I was burned out and I needed to grow. I needed to surround myself with a bunch of incredible ops people that were better than me. I needed to be able to hire a group that did maintenance. I needed to have all those things done. And, yes, you could have outsourced it and we could have bootstrapped it, but I really wanted to build a team, right? I actually saw myself as someone that wanted to be more of a CEO. Now, when I finally got that job years later, I realized I'm the worst CEO ever, but didn't know that at the time. At the time, I was like, you know what? I got to stop being this mom and pop, running a successful link, 3, right? Not a chain. Mm-hmm. It's a link of restaurants, and let CEO sounds like a better job. I can go back to doing R&D with my culinary guy or gal, and I can go back and start really digging into doing the architecture of the stores, and all the that didn't really happen, but that's what I thought in my head, and we decided to grow. We ended up doing the private equity deal, and gosh darn it, made some good choices, hired some great people, again, built a really good team, And I would say that we brought really, really high level people. I mean, we had the former head of training from CPK came over. I mean, the guy's still like unbelievable and still like contributing. His name's Jim Rich. Obviously we had hired Steve Mincer, who had like changed the day. We had this dynamic young man, Jacob Lee, that came and helped, at the time, our first DO, Sean Krajewski. So like the team started coming together rather than me, kind of doing a half-assed job at 5 jobs that you really needed senior people doing. And that allowed us to I would say that store 5, 6, and 7 became easier than store 1, 2, or 3, right? Like hiring the right team, getting the right, putting the right money forward. The running joke is that, founders, so often, right, get in our own way. We're penny smart, pound foolish, right? And that using that initial money, we built Goop Kitchen so much, exactly the opposite of Mendocino Farms. On day 1, we had a vice president of operations. On day 1, we had a director of culinary operations. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Completely opposite, because we built it. We knew what we were about ready to grow, and we were going to put best-in-class people on day 1, in the business. And those were the lessons I took from Mendo early days.
I really admire your vulnerability in sharing that it was actually that feeling of frustration where you'd achieved everything you told yourself you wanted before, and yet you were feeling so burnt out and ungrateful and miserable day to day. Yeah. Because I hear that from a lot of restaurant owners that are in that phase. They have a location that's absolutely crushing it, or 2 or 3 or 4, and they feel completely consumed by the business, where they're constantly running from fire to fire. Even though they're doing more profit than they thought they ever would, they feel trapped by what they've built and don't know how to escape that trap. Yeah. Was there a specific moment in those first 5 years where you thought about quitting, or that the business wouldn't work at some point? How did you emotionally process that feeling and then channel it into what we actually need is the capital to expand, and that will solve the problems here?
Yeah, look, I'll answer it a little more complicated. I think that every day I pretty much came in wanting to quit once it started getting crazy busy. But at the same time, there was plenty of things that I enjoyed, once you got into the day, right? And as all of us do, right? Watching how the guest, reacts, to the food or to the environment, those are the things that those are the biggest paydays you really get in this business, right? It's not like where your bank account sits. It's in the fact that someone called you and calls out to you and goes, "That's my favorite restaurant," or "That item's my favorite," or "Man, I took my family. We had the best time. Your staff was incredible." That's the stuff that those are the paydays. And you get enough, God bless, when you're busy and you're kind of doing some things right, you get enough of those paydays that if a few times during the day you're like, "I need to stop doing this," you're like, "Oh no, actually that was good enough for me to do this again tomorrow," right? Mm-hmm. I don't think it's always equity to grow, because a lot of these businesses throw off a lot of cash. I think it's how to grow. And most people don't know what their org chart should look like. They don't know how to properly scale. They don't have the right systems to replicate what they're being able to do in a very controlled environment. So I think that money matters, because one, if it's with the right private equity group, it justifies to very senior people that they'll come maybe work with you, mm-hmm. right? Because you've been validated by them, mm-hmm. right? I think that also a lot of the right private equity can give incredible insight, incredible advice. They might even have ability to recruit, you know what I mean? Some talented people. So I think all those things are important. I think the biggest watch out, and it was actually, I hope I can share this. I was giving this a little bit with you, with an incredible business with Owner.com, which I am absolutely in love with, and am using it with one of the groups that I'm mentoring. It's incredible tool that you're giving. It's such an equalizer for small businesses, and that's not a plug. Adam did not ask me to plug this, but one of the biggest items, that I would say is that when you're about ready to scale and you're about ready to bring in really, really senior people that have seen around the corner and actually have watched this movie play out, before you bring them on, it is unbelievably important that you know who you are as a company and that you have established it and you've maybe hopefully like put it into the operations, because what you want those people to do is to assimilate, right? Mm-hmm. Not dominate, right? So what you don't want is all of a sudden we hired, Steve Mincer from BJ's, and all of a sudden every single operational thing and vibe and energy in the building is now BJ's because he knows how to scale that. Mm-hmm. He has not that he's taking the playbook. Steve did not take BJ's playbook, but he's been in the system. He helped create the system, right? So inevitably, when it has not been defined, they're bringing massive DNA. Mm-hmm. So you better make sure that your DNA is clear in your building and how to go about doing that and understanding like how you've differentiated so they can come in and go like, oh, I get it. This is how I can plug in. I think one of the greatest compliments was that head of training from CPK, Jim Rich. He had come up to me after maybe 6 months of training and goes, and he had, I don't want to exaggerate, but he had maybe 30 years at CPK. Okay, so this is a huge, his entire career was CPK. Mm. And he came up to me and he goes, I just want you to know that my values, CPK had great values, my values more align with Mendocino Farms. And I just want you to know I've taken like the good things I've learned from CPK, but I'm more aligned with what you have going on here. That was one of the great compliments that Ellen and I could have gotten, because it meant we really had taken the time to define like who Mendo is, right? And Mendo's bigger than the founders. Like I've had actually a team member call me out when I was coaching someone wrong, and they walked up to me and said, that wasn't very Mendo of you. And it was an unbelievably cool call out, because they literally had gone to the co-founder, right, the architect of this, and called me out that I wasn't in line with the values of the company. And I was like, and in fact, she was totally right. And there was apologies that that ensued.
During that year where you focused on defining your values in that second location so that it felt like the first one, what were the specific things that you implemented among your team or in your training processes that led to people behaving in the way that you had envisioned? Mm-hmm. And how would you advise restaurant owners that are seeing success in a single location and feel like they're ready to expand to multiple locations to scale the magic from that first location through this clarity of values?
Yeah. There's no restaurant person or even business person that's not going to go like, oh yeah, of course. I want to we're scaling our values. Like no one's going to say they're not, right?
Yes.
No way. Except for most of the time, it feels like the effort is at the level of that you put a quote, like an inspirational quote on the wall, in like one of the, back in the kitchen or in the office. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to carry the day. So when you really look at like the brands that have succeeded and have stayed evergreen and continue to make those values live, we looked at like, let's take one, we said we want to be a neighborhood gathering place, or we are a neighborhood gathering place, not want. We are a neighborhood gathering place. Well, what does that mean operationally to the hourly team member? Mm-hmm. Well, we started defining it. We're like, okay, so what it means is if we're a neighborhood gathering place, we're not going to actually try to turn tables, even though we're fast casual, right? So it's fast casual, so we shouldn't be. But so if we're going to go bus, our busser is not actually supposed to say, can I get that out of your way? Or let me take that for you. They're supposed to say, can I create some talking room for you? Almost enticing that once this leaves, feel free to hang out and talk, right? If we're a neighborhood gathering place and you're in Sherman Oaks and you're a tutor for the local school that's just up the street, and you come in and you decide that the easiest place for you to tutor is inside our building and you're not purchasing anything, our team members are taught to go up to you and go, hey, can we get you a fountain drink? Well, I'm taking up your table and yada. No. We're a neighborhood gathering place. We're accomplishing what we're supposed to be here for, right? Everything isn't transactional, right? Likewise, if we're a neighborhood gathering place and like a giant group wants to come in and they're bringing food from the local, from the restaurant beside us, like we're in Maria Del Rey or one of the others that's next to a Chipotle, and you've got Chipotle coming in and taking up, these coveted tables that, that we have, right? And they're coming in and eating on those tables. Our team members taught to go up if they have a fountain soda and say, just so you know, refills are absolutely free with that drink, from us. We just appreciate you coming in because we're a neighborhood gathering place. So again, like, how do you operationalize something to a level that actually differentiates you, right? The other people, like, I don't know of a lot of other restaurants that are doing that, where it had built that into their training, right?
Right.
Where it's actually like something that's coachable. Everyone knows it, right?
Totally.
That level, okay? So if we really want to be, like, one of our values is our guest's favorite restaurant, right? That means that we have a relationship with our guest. So the only way that you have truly a relationship, and I mean, I don't know if you're a Starbucks or like you're such a successful young guy, you're probably like doing the more higher end, whatever. But at the end of the day, I think I define my Starbucks by the Starbucks that knows my name. And granted, they saw it when I digitally ordered, but they're the ones that are actually like calling out my barista, James, who I see every single day, right? And I say hi to James. He's saying hi to Mario, and he didn't make my coffee. He could be doing tables outside, but that's my Starbucks because they know who I am. They even know what I drink. They might even know what I do for a living, right? They might even know who I come in with, right? And ask, and they're happy to see me, not just because I'm spending money. They're happy to see me because they actually think that I'm a good person and I know them to be great ones, right? So we actually have with our team, and this is from Danny Meyer in learning from setting the table, this notion of collecting dots or key bits of information about our regulars. So much so, and this is when a culture starts to really elevate, and this is where, like, I think it gets cool, right? So we created Ella and I did this whole thing where, we're going to build relationships. We're going to have regulars. You're going to have your own regular list. So you have a building list of people that you know their name, you know what their favorite order is, you know information about them. I know this starting to sound stocky and creepy. It's not. It's done in a very upscale way. I walked into our store at Fig at 7th in downtown Los Angeles, and it's probably store 12. Gosh, I'm embarrassed that I don't know my babies and when they were born. But I walk in and I see the team at pre-shift. And there's all these things that we do at pre-shift. Like we talk, like we have a value of the week, and everyone in their pre-shift says how they're going to live their value. So there's this whole thing that we do to get in the right mindset to understand that we're not selling just sandwiches and salads. We're selling an experience. We're selling a feeling. We're selling happy, right? So they're in an argument, which, by the way, them being in an argument does not look like they're getting geared up to sell happy. And I go, what are you guys arguing about? And they're like, oh, we're having a debate on who the actual fan of the day is going to be. I go, what's a fan of the day? And they're like, well, if someone walks in that we all voted on, then we just buy their meal. Sorry, we didn't ask permission. We just did it, but we thought that would be cool. But if they don't come in, we'll tell them the next day that they didn't come in and know that they're back in the rotation. But it's just kind of a fun thing to reward if one of our regulars comes in and we all bet on who's going to come in, right? And I'm like, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. But talk about living, like they actually actualized at even a higher level. Every single store within 1 week had a fan of the day board up, and we wrote entire procedure around it, and it still lives in 66 restaurants today. And it had nothing to do with anyone in management. It was completely created by the team, understanding our values at such a level that they created this fun game, right, to reward our regulars. So, yeah.
That is fascinating. How do you end up hiring, promoting, or firing people based on values? Because I think that's where values get real, when you have to, as a leader, determine who it is that progresses in the company, who makes it in, and who you have to exit based on those things that you say. Like, how did you as a management team then make that a set of policies that your managers created incentives or disincentives to follow?
Since we're in long form, I'm going to give you like 3 things to think about. First thing is, and you've already experienced this, the easiest way to train someone is to hire the right person. So let's just set that aside, right? So how you go about the questions you do, we do an entire scoring thing. We're asking them questions because we've created systems for most of our hourly that we are not hiring for skill set. We're hiring for personality. We're hiring for mindset. We're hiring for culture. So we're asking more culture questions than we're asking like, what's your past experience?
What are some of your favorite culture questions? I love this so much. Like, what are some of the unusual ways that you evaluate entry-level talent to determine whether they have the right mindset or not?
If you're having a party, whose house do you go over to? Who hosts the most? And what do they do to make you feel special? The ultimate answer, the 10, is it's usually me. And then they go into elaborative talking about like, I love cooking, or I'm not good at cooking, but I always go and buy stuff at this one spot. And then I do cocktails or whatever, right? But if they're able to recognize when they go to a friend's, oh, it's so-and-so, and they're so good because they do the following things. They make sure they're not cooking. They've already had things that are easy to make so they can more spend in time and engage. And they don't make you feel stressed. It feels like this warm hug when you come in. Like if they're able to identify some of these things, showing that they have a high EQ, then they're getting scored super, super high. So that's like an example of like how we like, I don't care that you've worked in a restaurant before. We've made it so easy that we'll train. We just want someone with a high EQ that's passionate about taking care of others, that might be a bit of a foodie and loves talking about food. You know, these are the things that we're looking for, right? So we're asking questions. So we'll ask them like, what's the best meal that you've ever had? Why is it? Was it because it was expensive? Was it because, like what are the reasons that made it the best meal, right? It was the best meal. It's an overall experience. What is that best meal? We want them noticing that, well, it wasn't even that great, but it was with my dad. And it was, it was a really special thing because we used to go do that, right? If they emotionally attach and understand that we're not just selling food, but we're creating moments for people, that's powerful. And those are the kind of people that we want on the team, right?
Totally. I noticed that the most successful multi-unit operators that are able to then get to that place where they're going to 10 locations or 20 or 30 are amazing at retaining talent in addition to bringing talent in. And it isn't by just paying them more.
Yeah.
It's through the systems that they implement to make that talent feel happy about staying for long periods of time. And I've noticed with Mendo in particular, the locations that I frequent, it's the same people that work there after years, which is so unusual when a brand's made it to over 60 locations. So for the restaurant owners that are watching, what are some of the most interesting things that you've learned about retaining talent once you've identified those people that have the right mindset and are able to mesh with your culture?
Look, it was back to the, like, I was going to give you 3 parts of the answer. So the one is like you want to hire the right person. That's the easiest person to train.
Yeah.
Right. The second thing that I would say is that everyone, so you asked like, how do I fire? How do I hire? Whatever. That's literally answering the exact same question that you've reframed a second way. Everyone that I've had experience coming in contact with, right, wants to be at a place where they feel like they're being invested in, where they feel like they're having personal growth, and that whoever is their supervisor is emotionally and and their success is aligned with their success. We want to work at places that we feel like that investment is being made in us, that we're growing, right? And that we're actually getting to succeed, and that there's been clear expectations set for us on how to do things right. And when we do things right, it's being called out. So we're being recognized for it. Everyone's looking for that. I'm looking for that, right?
And so you're training your managers when one of our hourly team members make a guest feel like this is a great neighborhood gathering spot, or make a guest feel like this is their favorite restaurant. They get recognized for that specific thing. Like you made that guest feel like this is the ultimate neighborhood gathering spot, and that gets recognized.
We literally have our managers watching these points of contact We literally have the kitchen managers looking at the QA checkpoints. And when someone gets it right and they see it, we are catching people doing things right. I mean, their job is to catch. And that's why I said the AUVs, the increased AUVs, like it is a dedicated group of management team that is really engaged, not on catching people doing it wrong, but in catching them doing it right, right? Because you want to actually encourage your high performers to continue to engage and feel filled up, right? The second piece is when people like get it wrong, they actually want to know when they get it wrong, but they want it to be delivered in a way that shows that you're engaged to get them to improve. And oftentimes, and I will tell you, and if you can define a different category, but every time I've ever seen someone not do something right in any restaurant that I've ever owned, any restaurant I've ever been to, there's two ways that someone doesn't get something right. It's either an I don't know or an I don't care. Okay. So I don't care. The I don't care is so rare. It can happen. I can tell you all the ways that like an I don't care can happen, but an I don't know is so often confused for an I don't care. And what I mean by that is that we're hiring a server, but all of a sudden we get this giant rush and this host completely handles it wrong, not to our, deal. Well, most people would go up to coach them at other brands and go like, why did you just do that? You know that we're supposed to do this. And all of a sudden they're being, the better way to coach would be, hey, no, you just had that thing. Do you know how to, in the future, do you know how to handle that? What we do in that situation. If that person can't tell it back to you, even though they've been maybe a host for however long, it wasn't, I don't know. And of course, that's your fault. You didn't train them well enough, even though like they made it through training, they got certified, whatever it is in their brain, they didn't know.
I think this is especially true when you're filtering people for mindset over skill set. That's right. A lot of restaurant owners that I talk to tell me that it's frustrating that they bring people in that seem to not care at all about the guest or just get up and quit when something goes wrong in the restaurant, and how frustrating that is. But what I notice about how they talk about building their team is they look for the person that has 8 years of experience as a line cook, and they're not looking for the mindset that is going to lead to ensuring that when things go wrong, it's because they didn't know rather than the fact that they didn't care. You're filtering for care on the front end.
So I'm going to call it a little bullshit because Mendo isn't magically hiring all these people away. Shake Shack just hired a bunch of people away that so the other brands don't have anyone that care left. We've stolen all the good people with good mindsets. We were 66 units. We don't even barely count, right? The bigger issue is that so often I see it with restaurant players and even in the big multi-units, what they haven't done is they have not clearly defined for their team what successful looks like. And they have not broken it down to such an amount that you're able to capture it and catch it, and that coaches are not dedicated to helping team members in all their interactions be successful. So they're like, oh, they're not in the right mindset. They're not in the right mindset, or they're not doing what you think they should be doing because you're assuming that they know exactly the experience that you think they should be giving, but you actually haven't created in such a format that they could define it. If you actually interview that server that you are disgusted with how they handled it and said, I mean, do you know how to handle, do you know what my expectation is for service? Maybe they hit one point that's like, well, I have to greet the guest in 3 minutes. But by the way, you have me, I have 5 more tables than I normally have. So that's no possible way. Right. And on top of that, because I've taken 5 more tables, actually I got the manager on my thing because he's actually noticing that I'm actually not refilling waters nearly as well. And I'm not actually living up, but I actually have a double the size of like what I normally oversee. So you're now coming in on me, telling me that I'm not delivering and that I'm not in the right mindset, except for you set me up to fail. And by the way, even when I do it successfully, you don't catch me. You don't remind me. And at the end of the day, and that's why so many of our incredible team members have gravitated away from this industry, right? Because we have not gotten sophisticated enough in our coaching. We have not gotten sophisticated enough in our retention programs, right? And our retention programs are focused on individual development and making sure that our high performers, right? This is Darwinian, right? The worst performers were maybe a mishire, right? If they just don't have the capability, then you need to fire fast, right? But our highest performers, we can still lose them because they're needy. You're a high performer. If you didn't every once in a while have a board member telling you like, Adam, like that AI thing that you just created, that was pretty great, right? If people are like, yeah, I think you're doing the worst job ever. Like high performing people are seeking out, they're seeking out challenges. They want to like get them involved. At Mendocino Farms, we find a high performer. We're actually getting them to train. Why not leverage? They're a master at that one thing. How cool for them to be able to share like their magic, right? So that's the level of engagement that I think needs to change in our industry if we're really going to have the level of retention, we're really going to continue to recruit the right team. But actual organizations need to be focused on how do we create this value structure and operationalize it, and then on top of it, we need to actually like understand effective coaching of hourly team members. That's what I was saying. That Scott Greenberg book that came out is unbelievable. It's called Stop the Shift Show. And it's literally about focused on innovations, on coaching your hourly team.
Becoming the type of coach that deserves a great team rather than hoping that attracting the right team will make you a great coach.
Interesting. Love that. Good call. Yeah. No, I mean, look, I constantly say that I'm like the things that we now are doing. I almost feel like a spectator because my partners are so incredible, or our lieutenants and generals in the field are best in class, right? The level of success that we're having now is this incredible team, so yeah, I mean, I think no truer statement has been said.
I love the insight you shared about that question where you try and assess a entry-level team member's awareness of what makes a great host for a party environment, because that maps to their thinking about how they can be a great host within your restaurant. Are there any other counterintuitive questions that you ask candidates or ways that you recognize existing team members that would be useful to somebody that wants to create a world-class hospitality environment in their restaurant?
I think that, the hospitality and being interested in being able to talk about food and being engaged, because in the end of the day, we're trying to create an experience and we're actually trying to do it with like great food and great ingredients and creative, you need to be able to like share that story. And if everyone in the building isn't a storyteller, right? Like you're already lost. We need everyone to be like knowing that they're a marketer, for the brand. But if I was going to look for like other talents, I mean, and look, I'll pivot to the back of the house, right? To production in the kitchen. I think that there's plenty of people that are very, very fast with knife skills. And trust me, there's a lot of technical stuff that we do in the kitchen, far more than we do, with our hospitality team. But there's so much more to when you actually ask a team member, like, what are the things that you appreciate most with other people that you've worked with? And if they can actually start to like talk about this team environment and understanding teams. So one of the questions they ask is, did you play on any sports teams growing up? What were the lessons that you learned? And oftentimes if it's, some of our Latino, not to, pigeonhole, but they'll give a soccer analogy. If they can give a good soccer analogy, and go, what kind of team member did you not like playing with? And they talk about a ball hog or they talk about any of those things, we already know that they're triggering that they're going to be probably someone that's good for our group. Because when you're operating in a high intensity kitchen, it is truly, I mean, in general, the restaurants is a team sport, right? So we're looking for those kind of behaviors. And then the last one is, how much love do you cook with? We can give people quality assurance checkpoints that we validate and that we're reinforcing and that we're trying to catch them doing it right. But if you share with them, who's someone that you love in your life? Have you ever made them a meal? You know what I mean? What did you make them? What went into it? How did you think about it? And if you hear them speak passionately about something that they've created, you know that they have a capacity, whether they're going to do it in your building or not, they have the capacity to cook with some love. And that's what we're really looking for, right? People that take a lot of pride in this work.
Yeah. It sounds like even in the technical skills back of house, you're filtering for mindset and awareness of what creates excellence more so than their ability to wield a knife really well to increase throughput that way. As we start to reach the end, I would love for you to share some of the resources that have been most formative to your thinking, because as I've researched you, I've realized that since you started in the restaurant business, you've been consuming all sorts of things, from books to your subscriptions to the restaurant magazines for 20 years to the podcasts you listen to, and clearly have distilled a lot of the best. So if you could
know all this stuff, it's just creeping me out, but it's very true.
I did a ton of research in preparation for this interview, and it was one of the things that stood out to me.
I know you're a tech guy, and I'm kind of an old thing. Like, do I have cookies that are like? What else do you know? Yeah, sorry.
Because it stood out to me because it's a theme that I notice among so many of the best restaurant operators and operators in business generally, particularly the ones that are watching a 2-hour podcast like this one, trying to learn lessons. And those people are hungry for the nuggets from the great, as you described, the people that have shaped the industry. So what other resources, whether it's books or podcasts, have really shaped your thinking, and how did they do it?
Yeah, I might go a little bit more meta, you know, on it. I would say if one of the big lessons is that if you're really going to be in this business, because it's such a learned business, you need to dedicate to be a student of the business. And so often I feel bad for, the person that really is grinding and running, the 3 restaurants and going crazy, but it's everything they ever asked for. But if you're really like in that grind, if you're not carving out time to be both studying your competitors, studying from other, if you're in fast casual, studying from fine dining, studying from QSR, studying your own guests and looking at your own data, but truly being a student of your business and understanding like new ideas that are out there and innovative ways that people are doing things. It's going to be a lot harder for you to win. The running quote that I hope it's Pablo Picasso, and if it's not, I apologize, but this notion of like learn the lessons like a pro so you can break them like an artist. Like you really, really like to know these things is to then be able to massage them, to alter them. I mean, you look like, again, you go back to, what, that Kava founder's done, and even their CEO, Brett Schulman, who is like, truly one of the, greats, I think Brett and I are a little too young to be like legends, but now he has a unicorn status. So like, we'll give Brett legend. But when you start thinking about, like what they're doing in that innovation, that was a ton of studying Chipotle. That was a ton of studying. That's an amalgamation of multiple concepts. And then also their full service Greek restaurant and all that authenticity, that was put into building that brand. So look, I think if as many places as you can consume, I mean, one of the great books, I always recommend to like young founders, and I tell them like immediately don't adopt everything because it's super contrarian, is this book, Rework. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Great book, right? But one of the greatest lessons I ever pulled from it, it's made me an enormous amount of additional sales. And it was learn from your wins, not your losses. And it was this huge unlock for me. And I ended up going and meeting with the chief culinary officer of Cheesecake Factory, this incredible guy, Donald Moore. And Donald Moore was talking to me, and they had a board, and at Cheesecake they were innovating they were doing R&D on their top 5 sellers. And I go, well, why? Like what? Like these are your top 5 sellers. You're selling millions of these things. And he goes, if we can make that just a little bit more craveable, that's how we have so many people that are consuming it. We will be that more engaged, right? It will be that much better. We'll get more impact than actually bringing something from the bottom up to the middle. And it was breakthrough for Mendo. And we really switched, but had I not been reading Rework, and then I saw, like, had met with Donald. Now, later I made Donald Moore my business partner because he was one of the smartest guys and I needed to spend more time with him. But that was a breakthrough. The other thing is the ability to actually, like, leave your market. I will tell you, the one thing that we did with a lot of discipline at Mendocino Farms is I would curate tours at all these cities. And at the time that Mendo was coming up, Portland was going through this incredible food renaissance. Not that it still isn't. We were doing tours of New York. We were doing tours of Atlanta. We were doing tours around Texas, whether it be Austin, Houston, Dallas. We were consuming everything, anything Sam Fox was doing, we were paying attention to and really documenting it and really looking at it and studying it. That's not to copy, right? It was never to copy, but it's to actually understand and be appreciative of the insights that like, I see, like, the number one thing that you want to do is almost protect the brand as a founder from yourself, your own hubris that you've had some success and now you've been divinely blessed with the knowledge of what the guest wants. It's untrue. The guest are you willing to listen to that guest that you might not want to hear, especially if they're your avatar? The Lululemon mom was telling me that Mendo's getting it wrong. Like, you should be listening, right? Or if the PMix is showing you that salads are starting to fall off, then we are losing the hearts and minds of that consumer. If you're not looking at all that data and really being able to work on your business, not in your business, you're not gonna stay innovative. And if you're not innovating, like, if you're not growing, you're dying. There's no middle ground in this business.
I love that. I want to emphasize something you said, because I've noticed that so many of the absolute most successful entrepreneurs across industries do this, but a lot of the up and coming entrepreneurs don't see this until it's too late, which is that innovation doesn't come from being completely original and trying to intuit what it is that the customer wants. It comes from watching very closely at what that customer is buying from other brands. That is a tremendous source of innovation because it tells you their preferences that they're expressing through how they spend money, which is what you get from studying all of the other successful gourmet sandwich concepts, or how Sam Walton built Walmart. He famously was just constantly traveling the United States and looking at all of the other retailers with a notepad, figuring out what they did better than him, and then testing that out at Walmart. And when it worked, he took it. And this isn't like some secret. He literally documents this in his biography, but it's so against this wisdom that success comes from originality, when success actually comes from being a student of what works and then copying it. And innovation is blending multiple things that work to create a lot more value for the customer.
To almost a level that I've thought I might be arrested by a Panera Bread general manager. When we were building the first Mendo's in Suburbia, I figured that Ron Shake and his brilliant team, which I actually think are brilliant, right?
Totally.
I thought that they thought through how the distance between tables should be, so that the walkways. So I actually was around a Panera measuring with my general contractor, like all of their distances, and finally had the general manager come over. He's like, "You got to stop. Like, I don't know what you're doing." I'm like, "Oh, I ordered food." And he goes, "Yeah, but you're measuring." And I'm like, I gotta understand this. Like, I think you guys are the most thoughtful in your design, and there's so much, behind it. And actually, look, that's what we based it on. So if you're innovating, you're doing it on the shoulders of giants. At the end of the day, if you're not watching who those giants are, and it even could be from someone that's not a giant, that has a new innovative idea that they're bringing and that you could actually scale. I remember, Mendocino Farms has that Impossible had not been out. It wasn't in the market. It really wasn't. It was before it went to Burger King or whoever. And we had the product. We didn't know what to do with it. We weren't going to do a burger. And I was in Dallas and I saw all of these high-end moms eating taco salads. And I'm like, oh my, I nudged my wife. I go, could you imagine in LA someone having a taco salad? Right. And these were upscale. This was our demo. And I go, what if we did a very California version of a taco salad? What about that what is it? What was it called? Like, we couldn't remember what the name is. What about that fake meat stuff? Like, we could caramelize it and season it and yada yada and put it on top, and then we have like this thing, and we'll do it with a vegan dressing and whatever. And it came from this just one-off high-end cafe that I happened to see like three moms crushing a taco salad, and we did this kind of like futuristic, version of that. And so, look, I think is your innovation funnel, like, you really need to make sure that like you're tracking, like some real lead inspiration concepts, and then getting out there and listening and taking it in and being appreciative. So many people like want to walk into a restaurant and immediately your executive team or whoever your R&D team is, and our number one rule is don't tell me anything they're doing wrong. It's our number one rule. Why? Because look, they're in business. Customers are liking it. Find what they're doing right. We don't need to like identify their misses. Find the nuggets of gold. Dig right now for the nuggets of gold, and that's paired well for us.
Absolutely. I take the exact same philosophy where even competitors that are clearly doing things wrong are doing certain things right that we can all learn from. And this is so true in the restaurant industry, where in every city, there's a new set of competitors, and certain things for those competitors are going well that we can learn from without having to make the same mistakes ourselves that led to those insights if we study them carefully enough. So Mario, we're coming up on time now. It's been almost 2 hours, and I feel like I've learned so much from you and yet still have so much more to learn. But to wrap this up in a way that the typical restaurant owner or restaurant manager will be able to gain some value at the end of this podcast that they can implement in their restaurant right away, I'd love to know from you if you could just have people walk away with one major lesson that's influenced your career and contributed to your success, what that lesson would be.
What stands out, and hopefully it's been like kind of the thread that you've heard, is to really seek out mentorship. And in doing that, like, that sounds like, oh, of course. The way that I've been able to connect with some of these people that are amazing, right, and have really kind of helped shape, every business that I've been part of, is if you do get them to agree, come prepared, do your due diligence, really ask specific questions for them that whether they're around culture, and really call out what you've noticed that they do. Because they're going to be more engaged if they think that you're just not looking for this obligatory, like, tell me what I should be thinking about. You know what I mean? If you ask these ambiguous questions, then you're not going to get rich answers. If you get really granular, if you really do your homework, then you're going to get really rich questions. And on top of it, this is such a pay it forward business. And what they're going to see is in someone that they could impart, some of these insights. And you're opening yourself up for potentially, far more engagement. So look, seek out mentorship and then do your homework, be prepared, come in to ask specific questions, and then really listen, don't argue. And as clearly stated with my wonderful Tom Sims, discussion, if you listen, it can unlock a lot.
That's a great one that I want to build on because it's also been so valuable to me as an entrepreneur. It's preparing even before that initial conversation happens and how you do the outreach, realizing that they're super busy and that to stand out from the 1,000 other people that have asked them for advice, that you need to show an interest before you expect them to take an interest in you, and specifically point out the things in their journey that you want to learn from. Come with detailed questions so that they know that they have a willing, ready student that is going to make use of their time versus just somebody that's going to waste it with these generic questions that make them start from scratch and don't get to the substance of what they have to say. I love that so much. I've used that exact same strategy. So for the restaurant owners or restaurant managers that are listening to this podcast and looking for how to recruit that mentor, it starts with researching who the ideal mentor would be and then personalizing the message that you send to them or how you reach out with specifically what you want their help on, then showing up to that conversation more prepared than anybody has any logical reason to be, because you have such a deep interest in what they have to say, and that makes them feel validated and like they're making good use of the time that they are donating to you because they realize that you're the type of person that is going to take action on it and make the gift that they're giving you worth it. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you for joining. So fun. I feel like I've learned so much.
Oh my God. I'm a fan. You know what everyone should be watching is what you do next. All right.
Appreciate you saying that.
Take care.
Thank you. And for those of you that enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe. We're going to be interviewing other restaurant industry legends like Mario that we can learn a ton from. So I'm super excited to get into those interviews and really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Take care. And again, subscribe to this channel if you want to learn more about growing a restaurant business successfully.